So now let's learn about our remote repositories. So far, we were working on a branch or on the Git repositories, which was in our local. Let me go back to our main. I can say Git checkout main, right? So we were working with our local repository. As you remember in the previous slide, I talked about there can be a local repository and there can be a remote repository. So in our case, we can have a remote repository in different Git hosting platforms like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and so on. So in this example, I'll be using GitHub. Okay. Let me create a new repository in the remote. So I can say Git tutorial, right? And let me just leave it a public and let me create a repository. Okay. We have created a new repository. So this repository is basically in our GitHub in the remote repository. So if we check this, we don't have any files or anything here, but I want to have these files in our remote repository as well, right? Or there can be a case when, like, I'm a new developer, I joined a company and now I want to work in their project and they have their project set up in their GitHub repository. I want to get that particular repository in my machine. So how can we do that? So for that, we have this command called git clone, which is basically the remote URL, right? But now, since we don't have anything here, so I don't think it really makes sense to clone this repo. So I'll show you later on in this section how we can clone this, right? So we have our git initialized here. So let's continue the next command. So now we can say git remote add name and the URL, right? So this is a git repository in my local. I want to add the remote repository in this particular repo. So how can I do that? So as you can see here, it gives me the command how exactly I can do this, right? So this is my remote repository. Okay, but let me use SSH. This is my remote repository, right? So as you can see from the command, it says git remote add name and the URL, right? So let's do that. Git remote add, and what is the name? Basically, if you can see, the name is basically a origin, right? Origin and the URL. Basically, what is the URL? You can see here, we have the URL from here. This is an SSH URL or this is an HTTPS URL, right? So if you want to work with this SSH, so let me help you understand how you can do that. Go to your setting, go to your profile and go to this SSH and SPG settings. Go to this SSH and GPG keys and go to add new SSH key. And now if you want to add the new SSH key, then you can basically say, so let me create a new terminal. So if you want to add the SSH key, then you should first generate the SSH key. So you can say SSH key gen. Okay. So it says that enter the file in which you want to save the key. So let's say GitHub, right? And let's not enter the passphrase and let me skip it. So now we have this particular key. So if I want to add this particular key to my GitHub, so you can see we have stored the public key of this Git in this particular GitHub file. So you can say cat and you can say github.pub. So this is basically the public key. Cool, right? So we should copy this key and we should go ahead and add in our SSH key. And you can give the title here, any title, and you can add this SSH key. Yes, I've already added, so I can skip this. And I can go ahead and use our SSH URL. Okay. So for now, I don't really need this. So let me just remove. Okay. So let me close this terminal as well. So now let me add that origin URL. Okay. Origin. Okay, so now I have my local repo here. I have my remote repo here, right? I have added my remote repo URL here, but somehow I need to communicate between them, right? So for that, we have the next command, basically git push. So let's say git push. So this is the first time I'm pushing. Basically, I need to set an origin. I haven't set my origin yet. So you see, it says that the current branch main has no upstream branch. To push the current branch and set the remote as upstream, use git push there's a set upstream origin main. So this we have to do for the first time because we don't have the upstream yet. Okay. Okay. So that means now whatever changes I have in this main branch in my local repository, that should be reflected in my remote repository, right? Yes. So we have the 3 files which we created earlier. Cool. So let's check out our next command. So basically this is a git pull. This will pull the latest changes from the remote repository. Okay. So you can see, like, let's compare these two. Okay. So I want to use that git pull, but currently there is no new changes in my remote repository, right? So you can see we have these 3 files. So let's go ahead and create a new file here. Let's add a readme. Okay. So this is a git tutorial. We are learning Git concepts, right? And let's commit changes. So I will come back to about this commit and all. Let's commit the changes. Okay, so you can see in our remote repository, we have this readme.md file, but if you check our folder Git tutorial, we don't have the readme.md file, right? Here also we don't have the readme.md file. I want that readme.md file, or I want the latest changes from the main branch in my remote repository to be present in the local repository. So how can I do that? So we can do by using git pull. So if I run this command, so it will go and pull the latest changes from my main branch. So now you see we have this readme.md here. So if I can say ls, so we have a.txt, b.txt, c.txt, and we have readme.md. We have this readme.md now. Cool, right? And if you check git log, so we should have a couple of commits, because I made this commit earlier in the main branch, right? But I made this commit in my GitHub. If you remember, when I add the readme file here, I made a commit. Okay, so let's continue. So we have another command. Basically, this is a git fetch. Okay, so what will this do? So try to understand the difference between git pull and git fetch. So git pull, it will pull latest changes from the remote repository. Okay, and what will git fetch? It will fetch changes from a remote without merging it. So let's go in our GitHub and let me add this, let me edit this file. So we don't have anything here. So let me add, I have updated, and let's commit the change. So you can see I have updated this file. Okay, so let's run the git fetch command. So I can say git fetch. So you can see the difference between git pull and git fetch. It says compressing, remote, unpacking. So this part is still the same, right? But if you can see here, it updates our local file. It says one file change and 3 insertion was there. But here it doesn't mention anything about like having the changes in my current file, right? If I check my file if you remember, I updated my a.txt. So if I have this a.txt, so you see it's still empty. So it means that git pull will pull the changes from the remote repository and it will merge the changes. But git fetch, it will fetch the changes from a remote without merging. Like it fetches the changes, but without merging the changes into my local. So git fetch will be used only to understand like if there's any changes or if there's any update in my branches. Okay. So let's learn about the next command, git push origin -- delete. So in the previous slide, we learned how to delete the branch, right? Let's go back to our Git tutorial. So you can see currently we have only single branch, right? Now let me go to my new branch, git checkout, new branch 2, and let me add new file here. So I can say touch d.txt. So let me check the status. I can say git status, add d.txt. I'll say git add, git commit -m. I can say add d file, git status. So I'm ready to push, right? So let me push. So this is first time I'm pushing from this branch. So I need to set up the upstream. So you can basically see that git push, set upstream origin and the name of the branch. So let me just copy and paste. Okay. So if I go back to my GitHub and if I refresh, now you should see we have a couple of branch, basically main branch and the new branch too, right? So I want to delete this branch. How can I do that? So as you remember, let's go back to our main. Okay. And I want to delete this new branch too. So first I can say git branch -d and new branch name, right? So it says that it has been merged to rev and it says deleting branch new branch 2. Then if I say git branch, so I don't have the new branch 2 anymore in my local. Okay. But if I go and refresh my GitHub, we see that there is still this new branch 2. Why is that? Because if you remember, we have a local repository and we have a remote repository. So when we say git branch -d new branch 2, this basically deletes the branch locally only in the local repository. But in order to delete this branch from the remote as well, so we need to use this git push origin -- delete and the name of the branch. So we can say, let's run the command git push origin -- delete and the name of the branch. Let me copy this. So you can see we have deleted our new branch 2 from the remote as well. So let me refresh here. So you can see we have only a main branch now. We don't have the new branch 2 branch anymore, right?